Hey everyone, Mr. Happy here. Now, I went on vacation a couple weeks ago, and I really didn't do any work while I was there, minus one thing. And so there's actually a whole interview that I didn't know existed, that nobody's brought up to me in any of my Discords or asked me about what I thought of it. And I just happened to stumble across it when I was looking in the translations and live letter channel in 14, hoping maybe there was something for the 14 mobile live letter that had just happened. I mean, yeah, I gotta read this. I gotta see what this is. There was a Famitsu interview for patch 7.3. So that's what this video is going to be about. Now, I did scroll through it a little bit. I determined it was video worthy because there are some important details in here, both insights into future content and some confirmations of content that people were, well, let's just say some people were hoping was in 7.3. So, fortunately, we have all the translations right here. So, starting off, regarding 7.2's experience and what's to come next with the Fork Tower, Yoshi-P apologizes for what happened throughout 7.2. Now, the quality attracted dissatisfaction from the players. Creative Studio 3 has been trying their best to minimize regular scheduled maintenance and emergency maintenances, but apparently failed to do so for 7.2. Yeah. An acknowledgement. Sorry is great, but obviously people are only going to accept sorries for however long. People obviously are more interested in results versus sorries. But, you know, at least an acknowledgement of it going wrong is not the worst thing. Well, the final decision was made by Yoshi-P. Patch 7.2 is the first time in Final Fantasy 10? It's supposed to say 14, but that's fine. Where they released 2 large-scale content in a single patch, and they admit there were several aspects they didn't manage, it properly, mainly due to how swarmed they are in working on these tasks. On top of that, the base system for cosmic exploration actually went through a redo and remake several times. Interesting. I wonder what the core reason for that is. Probably because it's crafting and gathering, and how do you... With Ishgard, it was kind of self-explanatory how they wanted you to go through it, but they clearly didn't want to just do Ishgard a second time. They wanted there to be some more approachability to it. You can see where there's like individual bits, maybe the competition parts as well, which are completely different from the way Ishgard does it. This also heavily affected QA because they had to go through the content with so many bugs just before its release that they couldn't finish everything they need to. So the obvious visible bugs were fixed, but not for some bugs that can be triggered under several conditions, which prompted them to address via emergency maintenance. Well, at least we're getting some insight as to kind of what happened with this. The Crescent Island blunder that caused community troubles also triggered the need for Yoshi-P to address them via the producer live letter. The rest is history. And you see from the past 2 live letters. The past producer live letters, they could have set the time to explain on what's happening in greater detail, but not anymore today. So in order to address what is needed, they ended up identifying the issues that currently plaguing the content, and community acknowledged the blunder and addressed it, including solutions. Yeah, I mean, 7.2 was for a lot of people kind of the tipping point for Final Fantasy 14. Where kind of the same issues that always existed, things that people who play a lot would complain about, things you'd probably have seen in my videos, quite frankly, where we talk, oh, you know, this is the schedule and this is how much, you know, you'll probably get everything done in an odd numbered patch in a day, and, you know, we're waiting a really long time for the casual content. But it was kind of like Endwalker was the thing that kind of started nudging people to notice things more, and Dawn Trail was the tipping over point. And I think 7.2 in particular was the big tipping over point when it came to people finally going, okay, like, enough is enough, because the lower quality of the content, the way that a lot of people basically couldn't do it, it was a lot more stuff really catered towards people who were really, really into these contents and deep, and not really anyone else, after there wasn't really broad strokes of content through 7.1x, unless you were a Raider, Chaotic, Ultimate. You know, there was Savage before that in the main release, and then another Savage in 7.2, which I will say at the very least, 7.2, the Savage, really high quality. It was just those 2 extra contents that came later. All the other things in between, like the Mammal Jaw and Hildebrand, fine, but those aren't like long form contents like this is, so warranted. In a way, this was kind of similar to what they had to do back in their Legacy version 1.0, where Yoshi-P and Foxconn did the same thing in that kind of format, addressing player concerns. That's not a good thing to say. It's just like in 1.0, this is a sentence you never want to have to read. It's not like it's the only time they've ever done this, though. I don't know why they maybe they think that the blunder was that severe that they'd compare it to 1.0, because they've done the like on-stream explanation of mistakes before. It's not like it's never happened, but yeah, I mean, I understand. When asked if Yoshi-P had something he could relay in full, it was indeed part of where he mentioned the word cost. And this is what he has to say. Oh, the cost part, right. I use the word cost in the broadcast, yeah. A lot of people always take that as directly, specifically money and not time and resource cost. So let's see what the explanation actually is before I infer my own understanding of what was meant by cost. I do think that an explanation on that part was insufficient. Of course, even if I were to explain this in detail, I'd be told that this is irrelevant to the players, and that would be the end of it, since this is a topic that is easily brought up when it comes to this question. Allow me to once again provide a brief explanation. Currently, the Final Fantasy XIV team alone would consist of several hundred staff members. Although the number of members involved has been constantly increasing if you look from the past, we still have to set up our large-scale content development to last several amount of patches, and we inevitably won't reach the level where we can offer our customers anything, or we inevitably won't reach the level where we can offer our customers anything. In contrast to this, people would think, if that's the case, just add more staff members, but the actual development speed and quality, depending not merely on the number of people, but the amount of leaders in each section. I believe this is something that is common even in the creation field outside of game development, but we are from the technical field, so it's possible for the hierarchy of people who can create interesting things to happen depending on their sense and skill level. Within that, the leaders are born, but the issue is in the numbers. Furthermore, situations where people used to be in the player-manager position who create things of their own while managing their subordinates at the same time end up no longer producing interesting things the moment they start focusing on being a manager. Does happen once in a while. Yeah, we've seen that. There are people who worked on like random little features, and we found out they've been moved up, and we stopped seeing certain other random little features. So yeah, I'm trying to think of one in particular. I don't remember, because Mahjong was made by a person in their own time. All of A Realm Reborn's rework was actually done in developers' off time. So it's about what they're doing with their on time versus their off time. So I'm curious. Therefore, even if the issue lies in personnel costs, it's not simple calculation of numbers. While the QA team is planning to increase the amount of testers, that's good to hear, it is also necessary to also have a leader who can allocate staff while considering where the bugs would occur in order for them to do testing in an efficient manner. Of course, we tried to increase the amount of people like these for the past 10 years, but it's just not a simple matter of increasing them. For this, I believe it's also related to the factor of how there is critically insufficient amount of online game developers in Japan. Yeah, we've heard of this before, where the cost... This is actually an explanation we've gotten very similarly in the past, where effectively... One of the chokeholds with Square Enix's development, other than the netcode itself, is the fact that every position at Square Enix at Final Fantasy XIV's team, the actual development team, not the community teams in the various regions or any of the marketing, no, specifically the development team. You have to live in Japan, you have to speak Japanese, if you speak Japanese, you have to be willing to relocate to Japan. You basically have to be able to go into office. And there's a good reason for that, but it means there's a lot less of a pool they can reach into. They basically have to train the developers they get, and the developers they get are kind of green. They're not really pulling in seasoned vets or a high number of seasoned veterans within the Japanese game industry. And I wonder if there is a method, obviously I'm not going to purport to know what that method is, to somehow improve the pool that they can pull from, potentially by exercising some leniency in one of the two categories. I think the language category would be the rough one, so the coming into office one ends up probably being the bigger thing. We know that for their developers during the pandemic, that they actually worked to give them all effective at-home means of doing their work, and they put a lot of effort into that. So they've worked with it before, and it's worked before, although not in conditions they would like, and I wonder if there's a way to make that work so there's more people to pull from. Because we've seen them hire, we've seen them continually look for battle content developers. I mean, they were actually just 2 live letters ago looking for battle content developers. But it's not even just that. They need developers of like every kind. And they've also often said that it's the largest department, I think, is art. So like if they have like 400 staff, probably like 270, 280 of them strictly do things that are not making the content. They're not like the people who are organizing it. They're people who are like designing areas or designing the dungeons we go to. But they're not the people determining what goes into that, and like what their responsibility is not to actually make the content loop, the gameplay loop. So I just remember them having a really high number of art-based developers. So Maybe they'll find a solution for that, but let's see, because this actually continues. Yoshi-P is thankful to see the increase in staff members in fast pace due to them being originally players of 14, but have the desire to join the development team. And the said team also grew bigger and bigger since. But since there are many core staff members who create MMORPGs of such scale, even if one were to look at the world itself and not just Japan, so to say that they can increase the number of staff members to is a completely different matter. This doesn't mean they won't increase staff members further, and they will spend time raising new talent, but currently they are competing with the scale of 14 itself. I don't know. I think for me, my assessment is that a lot of the issues are not related to... I actually firmly think that it's not adding the number of developers. It does not increase anything unless you want more of what we already get, like getting more dungeons per patch. That's something that in theory, if they wanted to, increasing the amount of developers would be able to do that, but then you could use those developers for something else. I think 7.2 is a more fundamental misunderstanding of how to appeal to the player base, and having more people doesn't even achieve that. So while having more staff means you can try more things, take more risks, more insight into content, and technically more content developed, I think 7.2, you can look at both Cosmic and Crescent and go that whoever was in charge of those didn't fully assess what would make those contents attractive to players among less niche player bases. And I think that's where the Quantum discussion really comes into play, because I think that Quantum is the result of them seeing that, and that's what we hope. Unfortunately, we can only convey what we feel and hope for improvement, and a lot of people expect it and acknowledge that Final Fantasy XIV needs to see veritable improvement. We have seen some really solid stuff out of Dawn Trail, but we've also seen just a fundamental misunderstanding of the audience they are trying to reach throughout Dawn Trail, and that is probably the biggest blunder of them all. So I could go into a lot more detail, but we should actually make this more about the interview. I just had to throw my 2 cents in there. Their limited amount of personnel costs and a 4-month patch cycle as their objective. Their priority is to maintain a certain level of quality. In addition to that, they are also developing large-scale content side by side, which takes a period of around 2 patches of work. All of these have to be managed, all specifications checked, and implementation done thoroughly. So once again, if players were to read this and go, this has nothing to do with us, then it's true that they're right. But Yoshi-P also created the policy of, if we can't do this, then it's our responsibility to at least properly explain why. This particular topic is also something that bothers Yoshi-P. That said, Creative Studio 3 is investing a lot more manpower and is diverting personnel to prioritize on 14. So if you think you've got what it takes to make 14 a good game, you're very welcome to apply. Not to mention, players who play this game will always have the advantage of knowing what's best for the game. Even if there are voices from non-Japanese developers wanting to join 14, but the major barrier is indeed the ability to speak Japanese. Given that this game is developed in Japan itself, non-Japanese developers will need to have the ability to speak Japanese, and that's another issue. Yeah, I mean, that's a huge issue. I know a ton of people who would love to apply to Square, but they don't speak Japanese. I know people have actually started learning Japanese in order to try to apply to the development team. You want to know what's actually a really funny thing? At the Shadowbringers media tour, I had noticed the balance in the dungeons. The balance in the dungeons we played in the media tour were cranked up from what ended up on the live server. And so part of my interview, I actually asked Yoshi-P, the numbers appear to be above what is the average of a normal dungeon experience right now. Is this a goal that you have for Shadowbringers content to make dungeons a little bit harder hitting? And after that question, he was actually surprised that I had such a know-how of 14, that I recognized the above average damage numbers, and like what was actually being asked of the player was a little bit higher than what is usually the case in the live game. And he said, please learn Japanese and apply to development. He straight up told me, like, please learn Japanese and apply to the Final Fantasy XIV development team. And I was like, I don't think that's gonna happen, Yoshi-P. But yeah, so they clearly would just want that. Yeah, so yeah, if you want to work, if you're a Final Fantasy XIV player and you want to get into game dev and you're studying game dev, learn Japanese alongside of it if you want to work at Square Enix. And asked about the future plans that dev team have in mind in response to player feedback regarding the raid system for the 48 player on Crescent Island. Yoshi-P plans to do the following, where they want to retain the players, have the players remain. in the instance for a period of time after their entry. In addition to this, they also plan to include a system that allows players to see and have a clear idea of how many sanguine ciphers they have invested and determine if they themselves are selected for Fork Tower. So this is specifically about Fork Tower. We kind of already know this. Yoshi-P then elaborated that as long as a viable strat has been established, it can be cleared by 24 players with the other 24 players following along and clear. So that's only half true, because one of those 24 players can make a mistake that wipes the other 24. So I don't think this statement is accurate. They should be admitted they didn't adjust properly on that part. Yeah. That was the idea. That is not what was executed. Which is why in patch 7.3 they aim to adjust it so that they can reach the difficulty they originally envisioned for the content. The next Fork Tower is in development and will be created based on the feedback they received. There are also players who ask for complicated mechanics unless the devs want to fulfill that wish to some degree. Complicated mechanic could mean just the puzzle solving aspects that come, like Fork Tower has the key section is probably the most notable one. The bridge is definitely a more notable one as well. But I don't think 7.3 really made anything that fixes that previous problem, the 24-24 thing that he said. But anyway, good to see some self-reflection. We need to see it in results, but good to see self-reflection. Regarding the story, the original point for Dawn Trail is meant to be a summer vacation of sorts, so before they start to walk a new path, they'll be involved in being a mentor to young ones where we provide help and advice for them to seek their own path. For the story has already been illustrated so far. For 7.3, the theme will involve characters' path being set. This is the reason why the patch title is The Promise of Tomorrow. In patch 7.3, you will know what Calyx's aim is and will involve the Warrior of Light itself as well as their future. You also get to eventually find out the reason behind the Warrior of Light walking a journey as a hero once again. Yeah, no, we got that already. In a way, it's like your summer vacation is now over. It was over before, man, trust me. Regarding Sphene, the relationship between both Sphenes you see in the story are similar to the relationship between the Source and the Shards. Yeah, 7.3, you'll see how both paths cross, and you'll get to find out what path Sphene will choose from now on. Yeah, okay, so we already know this. Regarding the Endless and how the people solution I perceive them will reach a conclusion. Okay, all the story-related bits are specifically about 7.3. So I think we can kind of move through these. Trial is an obstacle to the character have to surpass the hurdle in order to move forward. Yeah, I would definitely describe it as a hurdle. Sphene is revealed to be Atonga's design, but the Endless Sphene and the 7.2 Sphene. There are 3-4 rough patch artworks for 7.3. Oh, I'd like to see the other ones. So it means new clothes that Sphene is wearing as his design. Okay, now we have the Final Fantasy 11 raid. Translator does not play 11, so please contact me in case I missed something. Okay. The theme for the first boss is Kieran, as shown. Kieran is the main boss that will summon only 2 out of the 4 Guardians. I have not left him alive long enough. Okay, I make pre-mades, so that's why I don't usually see it. But I'm sure there are plenty of pugs that don't see 2 gods either. There are 4 different timelines, but throughout the battle, you only fight randomly 2 of them. Yeah, okay. This battle with random timeline is one of the first in 14. Not really. But also, we usually only see 1. So it's a more random timeline if you think about it that way. Camelot will appear. As for his brother, Yoshi-P believes it will be as the player would expect. As for what other enemies you'll fight, okay, this is what you'll do. Right? You can already figure out what kind of enemies they're bringing to 11 since they appear in the trailer. This battle where you fight 2 at once, and the 2 which you're fighting, well, time to find out when the patch release. Don't worry, we know. The first episode of the Alliance raid was more of a lead-in. Turn something 11 understand. Unlike the first walk, there are no extra Sandoria cities where you can visit, and Lower Juno will remain. That would have been really cool if we could also go to Northern Sandoria and hang out there. There's an NPC that will provide an explanation of the bosses. Yep, that NPC did the same thing the first time around. New NPC will be added. NPCs that fashion check the equipment you obtained will also be added. NPC that fashion checks the equipment you obtained? An NPC that provides explanation on the... I went back in there. I saw a Hume Black Mage that talks about the staff. And makes a joke about being a Black Mage. Oh my god, I just remembered something I forgot to do. I'm so stupid. Alright, hold on. I have to re-record a video. Fortunately, it hasn't released yet, but I have to record an extra part. New NPCs will be fashion check. I gotta go back in and check this because I don't recall an NPC that fashion checks the equipment you obtained. An NPC that provides an explanation on Vanadil equipment. I remember 2 more dialogues, but I don't remember that. I'll have to go back in and check again. All right. Deep Dungeon is explained where this content will have changes that reflect the change in content design philosophy that 14 has implemented up to this point. Content direction. 14 is the game, so yeah, okay, so this is probably similar to the other thing that we had. We are focusing on the target audience for each content implemented, a various amount of content aimed at different kinds of players. Yeah, implement alliance raids and odd-numbered patches that capture the interest of players who mainly play in a casual manner, while for even-numbered patches implement high difficulty. On top of that, we would often implement ultimate, which is even more difficult. As a result, even when new content is implemented, not all content will be played by every single player. Yeah, it's the same. This is the same thing that we got during the live letter. Hardcore players will want a high difficulty raid where they can race to aim to be world first. On the other hand, casuals will want a raid they can complete in 2 or 3 tries, and then do farming, because that way you have creators who have been creating content through dividing segments. I don't think there's anything wrong with the expanding the total amount of content as the major policy for 14. By dividing content into categories this way, the development team is able to establish guidelines for when and what kind of content to create. Because the rules were the same, consistent, we were able to focus in a certain direction, like focusing on boss battles for this content for one. However, coming to this point, we finally began to reach the conclusion that considering we've created this large-scale content, it's better for us to start putting in the effort to have all players play it. Yeah, I mean, that makes sense. Things for like Cosmic Exploration, Crescent Island, Deep Dungeon, if you're going to do these like hallmark contents that are kind of like the big shebang of the entire patch, they really should have means of approaching. Deep Dungeon always has, but they're clearly taking that a step further, because Deep Dungeon usually wanes off pretty quick and becomes mostly about the people doing solos more than anything else. With this mindset, Yoshi-P is adamant to create a content where, regardless of whether you're casual or hardcore, you can still enjoy this content to the fullest in different ways. Deep Dungeon will still be the same as the previous ones to a degree. The story is completed by reaching the 30th floor. You can repeat those 30 floors to upgrade weapon and armor. If you're in between or mid-core, you can get a static of 4 to challenge the remaining floors. And if this is your cup of tea, you can test yourself to the max by soloing the entire dungeon. This has been prepared for players of that kind as well. It's the same as Deep Dungeon that came before, but in order to have as many people try out Deep Dungeon, they have put several changes in specifications. Those are all the checkpoints and challenge log stuff that they're adding in. Such changes would be to allow matchmaking on all floors, allow the option for you to clear the entire Deep Dungeon with a static, which of course has the advantage of clearing faster by working together. If it's not your cup of tea, you can also do so by matching with randoms if you so wish. You can also go gung-ho with it and keep challenging floor after floor. You're going to take it easy by doing it periodically. Reach floor 99, you get the practice. This content is completely independent from clearing Deep Dungeon, so you do that and then you go back in order to clear it for real. Such a feature is not meant to make the difficulty easy, but it's more on making it easier to challenge the boss specifically, so casual players are more encouraged to give the entire Deep Dungeon a try. Entire aim for this Deep Dungeon is to expand the accessibility, as they do think that the matching system of 14 has the pros of being able to play comfortably with players. However, this doesn't change the dangers of Deep Dungeon, where the higher the floor you go, the more dangerous it becomes. It traps in many enemies loitering about. Thus, their attacks are also much more lethal. If you're not careful, you get wiped easily. Yeah, so they're saying the difficulty of the later floors is pretty much the same. Yoshi-P then reiterates a change in content design, that if we are able to implement a content, then aim for a content where every player will have something they can enjoy. That's the current 14 theme that they'll pursue. Their mindset will not stop at Deep Dungeon, and they will apply to other content in the near future. We actually know what that content is. I think maybe it gets mentioned later in this interview. But yeah, they clearly want, excuse me, it's still early in the morning. No coffee. They clearly want, these hallmark contents to have something for everyone. That does always run a risk when you make something for everyone. Could be for no one. It's the general phrase that follows with it. But this will be the first test of that. So, in a way, we're beta testing this concept, and I hope it works out. Worst case scenario, this isn't much better than your average Deep Dungeon. And for people who aren't into it, they still won't be into it. And lesson learned, didn't work. I have my own concerns specifically about Quantum. Without knowing what's in the Blessed Horde, just getting more Blessed Hordes on top of the title for clearing Quantum 40 is probably more important than the actual increase in the Blessed Hordes, because people will do Ultimate and just get titles. And if the Blessed Horde has something nice in it, it's probably not too unrealistic that people may decide to help for Quantum 40. But I worry about the health of anything that isn't Quantum 40, because I don't know if the Blessed Horde is enough of a reason for people to want to challenge even the lower tier boss. It should be also emphasized that just because it's accessible doesn't mean the content becomes purely simple, where many voices want the difficulty of clearing it solo to be maintained, so they will continue to maintain it that way. On top of that, they're implementing a new extra challenge. Yeah, that's the Quantum one. Okay, so yeah, and then this is already shared in the PLL, so the details will be omitted here. Yeah, so he just goes over the Quantum stuff again. Ultimate Chaotic. We will have a new Ultimate somewhere in 7.x. I said that the next Ultimate is almost certainly in 7.5. I've been saying that since before we knew there was no Ultimate in 7.3. The reason being that in Shadowbringers, they wanted to do the second Ultimate in the X.5 patch. The reason being is that Ultimate players in Stormblood said that it would be better if we only had 2 ultimates to do one in 0.1 early on and to do one in 0.5 later, so people waiting for the expansion would have this new ultimate to chew on. There's like one last big event before the next ultimate, and players who were up to that difficulty scale could entertain themselves for longer. So saying anyone actually doing ultimate would, they would have more to do while waiting on the expansion. And they didn't accomplish that because of the pandemic. So they basically they didn't scrap it, but they pushed it back to 6.1, and then we got top in 6.3. I figured they were going to try that again. And given that there's no way it's going to be in 7.4x for the ultimate, 7.5x is where it will belong. Now, to be fair, he says it will be somewhere. Normally, Yoshi-P says they are aiming for it as to not make promises. I will say that if they fail to get an ultimate in 7.5, then they need to stop. They need to scrap the idea, because clearly something's wrong in development that isn't working. Or more intelligently, they would need to understand why they failed it without a pandemic. So hopefully that doesn't happen, but if they do, there needs to be more self-reflection about the management style of that style of content. Probably overall, but of that style of content. Yoshi-P is aware just because the 40 offering on Quantum is near Ultimate, it's still not Ultimate content. Yeah, no, that's completely correct, especially because you said it's a shorter fight. It's probably 8 to 10 minutes. So yeah, the big thing with Ultimate is that it's a 20-minute encounter that eats a lot of your time, and the amount of mechanics you can do with 4 players and the amount of mechanics you can do with 8 players are very different. I actually have an idea of some of the stuff we're going to see in Quantum, and I may make a video on that. New Ultimate is under development. Yoshi-P emphasized that creating a new Ultimate is much harder than you think. Future plans for new Chaotic have not been decided yet. Chaotic is a content where if the designer is not on the level of creating Ultimate, then they don't have what it takes. So basically, they treat Chaotic in development like Ultimate, in the sense that you need to have that very high level of specification. So yeah, and if you are that kind of player, if you are that kind of developer, please join the dev team. So if you got the guts for it, do it. Yeah, I figured Chaotic was a one-time experiment that we would maybe see more of next expansion, and not a promise of a consistent form of content that we would see. Nor do I think Chaotic is something that needs to be something we see more of. Chaotic has about, last I checked, it was like a 13 to 15% engagement rate. Decent for that style of content, but for an extreme trial, you generally want 20 to 30%, depending on the difficulty of it. And Chaotic's overshoot in difficulty is definitely a big contributor to that. The overall number of players who were stuck on the second phase of the Chaotic is probably about 12 to 15% of the player base as a whole as well, like looking at the numbers. So I think they could have achieved probably close to 25% in terms of actual clear rate, and then had additional players that, like, another maybe 5 to 7% that were stuck in it, that just couldn't get past it, which is a better metric. But if you're going to do it in the future, you need to be hitting at least 1/4 of the community, if not more. And so they overshot on the difficulty, and I think that definitely led to it not feeling like it was as in demand, and definitely a better assessment of what they need to do. I'm of the opinion they should retroactively be going back to Chaotic, this one, and lifting some of the issues with it to get people into it, to see if, upon that promise, people feel encouraged to try and feel encouraged to engage with it more. Because I feel like that would give them a better assessment of, if we did it correctly in the way we intended to do it initially, would it have turned out better? So, just my two cents. Cosmic Exploration. What to expect for Cosmic Exploration? Different mecha ops, powered up version of joint tasks to complete, as well as many other elements. For joint tasks, I'm assuming they mean the building of the base whenever, we get the bar to fill. They're focusing on making it feel nicer to play, done reflecting the blunders they made. They'll be sure to reflect that they've learned from player feedback. First of all, the premise here is that when we make crafting and gathering more elaborate, but when you consider how you're going to repeat the process again and again, if one starts to feel weary after one play, then it'll make playing the game subsequently painful. Yeah. Which is why during A Realm Reborn, we deliberately created content that centers on how you can just handle that repetition via using a macro and allow the economy to circle using the things you gather and the things you crafted. Conversely, this also means that the task itself becomes very simple. However, Cosmic Exploration gives the impression of how it feels like the thinking has stopped, and how it did not expand further from its simple design, despite being a new content. course, creating a large amount of content in order to give it volume is very important. However, if we neglect the play feel, then it would be impossible for us to provide a better playing experience. Focusing too much on quality would end up becoming something difficult for many players to enjoy. If we focus on only quality, it tends to end up being tedious work. Personally, I do think the current level of balance for cosmic exploration is really bad. Glad to hear it. This is where I feel it needs to be improved, and currently we're having 70 to 80 staff members playing the missions and joint construction tasks and adjust the content while discussing on issues such as asking each other whether it's satisfying to play or asking why the SE for this scene is all-purpose rather than unique. The SE? The Square Enix? I don't know if the SE probably means something else, but my brain's not working well enough right now. It is tough and a lot of work, but the dialogue lines and the missions and all are written by the development staff, so in a sense they are created with our thoughts and feelings invested in it. As long as we are able to convey our thoughts and feelings through the Loporits, and as long as players would end up enjoying it, I believe it is necessary to provide them with an appropriate level of challenge and rewarding experience. This is not limited to just cosmic exploration, but it's also concerning that recently there have been cases where the feeling of play and accomplishment have been neglected in order to increase content volume. Of course, the overall structure is important, but I want to make sure that everyone in the development team, including myself, is on the same page and be conscious when creating content that feels good to play. To this end, this also means I'm improving on my precision on producer-director checks. I'm assuming that's play tests, when he play tests it himself. Or player whatever checks. All the same, I'm glad to hear that so I actually don't fundamentally dislike cosmic exploration, but the reasons for doing it were not there. I think there was horrible imbalance in the initial release of the mecha ops, where basically the mechs were solely responsible for the success and everyone else was just lucky to be a bystander. But then the mech misses out on the buff for getting the 20 boosts for the next missions, and that boost is so insignificant that if it's better to just spam the missions and stop and do the mech ops in order to get the buff in the first place. But then if nobody becomes a mech, you can't even complete the mission. No, that whole thing was a mess. There's only 2 of them, so, the mission variety is not great. I think that as we expand on Fianna, we should get access to more mech ops, because the zone expanded for the original one, but I don't think any more mech ops actually opened up. I also think they can improve the rewards for being... I also think that if nobody uses mech op tickets, that 5 players should be able to just get into a mech without the ticket in the first place. So that way, if there's nobody wants to spend the points on it, there's still at least some chance that you could get in. It's just that the ticket guarantees that... I'm sorry, if you're one of only 5 tickets, you're guaranteed, but if there's more than 5 tickets... then, you're probably not going to get it. But at least let those people sign up for the ability to go, even if they don't have a ticket. They just won't have the priority on it. And then on top of that, a lot of people complained about the GP problem with the gathering missions. That's been adjusted. And the crafting mission. Most people I know didn't really complain about the crafting missions. If anything, my only complaint about the crafting missions is that they gave us new unique actions that most people just completely ignore. So as much as it's kind of annoying, I would like those actions to be a little bit more integral for the next crafting section, at least on the harder missions. They can make the easier missions like way easier if you understand how to use those, but still doable if you don't. But otherwise, I would like to see them make more use of those unique elements. Yoshi-P also shared that his eyes recently are swinging, being dry and misty because of being tired. Other things, chat bubble 7.3, hats for Hrothgar Variant 7.3, PvP changes. They're going to continue to improve PvP even further by allowing basic practice, support systems, and more. Yoshi-P is so sleep deprived even after the interview is asking him to sleep. So, yeah, I read this part before I started recording. He's basically saying that when he's done working, he also starts playing the game, and then he can't stop playing, so he just ends up being really tired. Like, please, I need my private time as well. The addition of animation, you're about to ride Mount. Yeah, we saw that. Yoshi-P also mentions about seasonal events being given more attention. Actually, not an infrequent amount of people would really like better involvement in seasonal events. Seasonal events used to sometimes take a few hours to get everything. Used to. And if some of them could technically go even longer. I think that the hidden eggs around the world during one of the Easter events where you could find the Spriggans carrying the eggs and then kill them and they would respawn all throughout the world, was a perfectly fine thing to have. And, the first time they did a few things with Halloween, and we used to see them try new things with seasonal events, and it's become, well, we've done that, so now let's just make sure that they can always play that every year, but let's not do anything new. The jump puzzle in the summer festival usually undergoes a few small changes, but there's not an actual reward for climbing during that because they don't want people to feel pressured to have to do it. I think you can introduce things into seasonal events for players to actually grind out. I'll also actually pull a Final Fantasy XIV mobile reference here. Now, not for the seasonal event, but for Final Fantasy XIV Mobile's launch event in China, they added an event where there were a handful of different things. There was an extra fate with a giant penguin. There were extra shops where you could exchange tokens to get stuff for the penguin event, because Tencent's main mascot's a penguin, so they did a penguin thing. But they also made it so that while doing any duty in the game, there was a chance that a fat penguin mount could drop. And that mount, you just roll on it like a mount. I think dungeon mounts, like the Magitech Reaper, are wildly underused as a reward structure, and they should consider adding items of rare value to those things and not feel bad about player. Like, yeah, you can eventually add it to Mod Tomes, like, way, way later down the line. But, like, they should feel okay about introducing things like that into the game. Something that, I'll do my roulette today and maybe the mount will drop from the random dungeons I'm doing, or I'm doing the extreme trial and, and then look, the mount actually happened to drop. Like, if it just gets you on the game during that event period more for the chance of getting it more. The problem is that a lot of players would be like, but then I'm so mad because I didn't get it. It's like, you could make a party of 4 people and do it yourself. You could solo duties if you really wanted to earn it on your own. Like, maybe even if you have to do it synced, maybe they just make it so it's part of variant, so people could do variant solo and get it to drop or something. I don't know. I feel like they shouldn't shy away from that just because people would be like, wah, I didn't get them out. Having some scarcity of event, and then an event you can bring back so people can actually do it, encourages people to play the game a little bit. It is an RPG at the end of the day, you know what I mean? So I don't think they should shy entirely away from that. Fanfest announcement soon. People thought Fanfest announcement were late. They will be late, but only because there's no major events in August. No live letters, I should say, which is normally where they would announce it. July would have been slightly too early. August is when we should have been expecting them, which we probably won't get it till September because that's probably when the next live letter is. So that makes sense. Chinese and Korean versions are almost on parity with the global version. So yeah, everything around the world. Our world races will now include 2 new regions very, very soon. Doesn't mean there will be 5 FanFests though. Yeah, I don't know what you would split. Dude, sometimes I'm depressed at how much stuff is split between 3 FanFests. Imagine splitting it between 5. Do look forward to FanFest announcement soon. Yoshi-P has his closing words, admits that 14 is far from perfect and accurately are acutely aware they're facing a major challenge because of all the work that has been accumulated over the years. Yeah, you gotta work under that. Lastly, Variant Dungeon is indeed scheduled for 7.4, and like Deep Dungeon, there will be changes to specifications. Yeah, they're gonna try to... I'm very curious because they keep mentioning Variant and not Criterion, so I'm wondering what they're going to do, because it makes it sound like maybe Criterion is not going to exist in the same form. Very curious to see. There was also a brief, they did like a live letter, like patch note reading. I think there was something else in here. 7.31 they'll make it easier to get Ether Pool on the 50th floor. Getting up to the 50th floor for Palace of Dead. That's not the only change they need to make, in my opinion, as someone who just redid a guide for it. But yeah, it's we'll see. We'll see what happens. That was a chunky interview. We had a lot to talk about with that one. I didn't expect this recording to go on that long, but hey, when it happens, it happens. But that's going to be a wrap for my video on the Famitsu interview for patch 7.3. Thank you for watching this video. Let me know what you thought about it in the comment section of the video below, and be sure to like and subscribe. I will see all of you in the next one, and until then, take care.